So we're outside now. Tell us a bit where we're at. We just came outside the cave.
Well, this is one of the most amazing that I would welcome and invite people to come to visit at the Shepherd's Feast location. We're speaking of the Franciscans location. Now here, not many people know about the people of the 4th century having a huge church and monastery built on top of this place. Now we've been at the cave, one of the most amazing places that I would go and visit with people. But here, if you look around you, you would find that there was such a huge area kept for this huge monastery church built on top. Look here, 2 rooms, 2 connected rooms for the monks to stay and reside upon. Now, how can we discern that? If you look on the floor, you'd see mosaics. Mosaics, almost the same pieces used the floor of the Church of the Nativity, which means to us that this monastery built at the same time the Church of the Nativity built in that time, which means that Queen Elena must have had this place built. Now, what happened to it? Of course, devastated. During which time? Of course, it was 529 at the time, the Samaritan Third Revolution. You know, when they revolted against the Byzantine Emperor at that time. But, of course, rebuilt again by Justinian I. But what happens next that it all devastated by the assassins, or what we call the Persians, during their invasion of the land in 614. Now, as I said already, 2 rooms for the monks to stay. Now, if we move around...
And this is actually built on top of the cave that we've just been in.
Exactly. When we say in the top of the cave, it doesn't mean that this was built because of the Shepherd's Feast location. Okay? There was some argue about the authenticity about this area. Some people say that this monastery was built in a later time, not at the time of Elena, but at a later time, which was used as a Byzantine agriculture establishment. And since when? Since they found many pieces which reflects the using of agriculture tools. Here is an example of that mill, that huge mill. And that's what I'm going to show you later, okay? Now, as we move around, you see the stairs. You can see here the traces of the stairs that leads to one of those rooms that the monks or the Byzantine monks used to live in. And here, a small chapel cleaned by the Franciscans who possessed this area. And they also believe that it was set up as though as a chapel or a small chapel for the monks to use, or even the local population to use. And here's another room here. And
with mosaic as well.
Yeah. And the most amazing part of this huge area is the apis. Look at this apis. What is apis? This is like directing the people for prayer. Now, if we look here, or even stand here, Paul, you can imagine me as a priest standing for what? To bless the people. And the people will be sitting where? Behind me. Okay? So this shows the direction of the chapel or the church, you would call. Now, the apis, of course, in the Old Testament, in contrast of the direction of this one, is usually directed towards the east. Because according to our Christian customs and tradition, we're expecting Jesus to come as the thunder light, as the quick thunder light from the east. And that's why most of the churches and monasteries in this region, especially the Church of the Nativity and the Holy Sepulchre, is directed towards the east. Okay? Now, of course, we'll keep moving around because I wanted to show you other parts of the monastery. And here, if you ask me, what is this? One of the silos. The silos is the place where they used to keep the grains, which means that this was an agriculture establishment for the locals or the Byzantine monks who used to reside in this area. Now, fields, of course, they've had them agricultured with grains like wheat and barley. Remember the 7 species that was once mentioned in the Old Testament's book of Deuteronomy, the 7 species, especially barley, wheat, grapes, olive trees, many plants and species that used to be agricultured in the area would be collected and kept within the monastery church rooms and silos, as you can see here.
So do you have an area for crushing the grain?
Threshing floor.
Yeah.
Threshing floor, that's what I'm going to show you next.
Yeah.
Now, the next thing that I'm going to show you, Paul, is amazing. Jerusalem cross. Amazing. Look at this piece.
So it's just like a big solid stone that's been cut out into a Jerusalem cross.
Jerusalem cross.
Yeah.
Was it as old as the time of the Byzantines?
Yeah.
That's the question.
Yeah.
Now, what it reflects, or what does it stand for? Some people say it stands for the Jerusalem cross, or the Jerusalem area. The directions, the north, south, east, and west. The 5 wounds of Jesus. Many people, the people, they've had their own interpretation about the explanation of the Jerusalem cross. But amazingly, and just, since I started working this profession, I came up to know that the Jerusalem cross is as old as the Byzantines. And here's a proof.
Yeah.
Wells, huge wells. That's the area. For the same explanation, to collect water for the summer use. Because we lack water. Bethlehem lacks water. Some years the rainfall would be abundantly fall on the lands, but some years we'd have a drought that would last for 2 to 3 years. So we need places to collect water. This is a good example to collect water for their own use. I mean, the household's use.
Yeah.
The eastern part of the monastery. Here's a good proof that the early churches were directed towards the east. See the apis?
Yeah.
What is the apis? The apis is the place where the communion and the priest used to serve the people from. So you can imagine the priest is standing there preparing the Holy Communion for the local community who would be sitting around the place. See? So this gives us a clue about the way this early church monastery looked like almost 1600 years ago. Now I'm going to show you another cave. I would say it's one of my favorite.
So we're in a very big cave now, and there's a little bit more light to this one, isn't there?
I would say that this here is my favorite for the people to come to visit because it gives you a good clue about the way the people used to live. Now, I usually ask people, since we visited that cave that we've seen at the beginning, what do you think about this? This shows us that there was a gatekeeper on the top where the people used to guard. And coming down here for the guest room and the living room would be that area.
Very small.
Very, very small.
Yeah.
Would they have their beds as we have today? No. Of course, they would thresh and have the floor as their own beds. Okay? Now, here's the barns, the animal barns.
Yeah.
See?
It's one big open cave, but sections of the cave are designated for different areas.
Designated for
so
different...
So the animal section's just a little bit lower, isn't it?
Is lower. You see, when I said lower, that would be the good idea of what happened at that time. Lower.
Yeah.
Family, Joseph, when they arrived here, they couldn't find a place. So they were asked to move on the backside of the house. Yeah. So here's the backside of the house among the animals. The lowly. Yeah. Manger, lambs. See? Now, of course, at that time, the time of Jesus, they would have the tunnels, dug into their homes in case the thieves broke into the house. So here's a huge tunnel. Of course, we will not go into that today. Such a huge tunnel that would lead us to the other side of the complex. I went there many times, but you have to have a good pack in order to crawl down that area for you to be safe.
So is this like an escape tunnel?
Escape tunnel. Yeah.
And this has been dug out? They specifically dug this out?
It's human or man-made channel to flee out the place in case somebody broke into the house. Now that would be used for the same purpose. Could be another room for another member of the house, like my own room.
The mother-in-law. Exactly. Keep the mother-in-law there.
Now here. So what do you think about this bowl? This would be used for what?
Water.
To collect water. Yeah. Exactly. Now remember, one of the most authentic and still remember practices of the Jewish community at that time is to have what? In order to prepare yourselves for the prayer.
Like a mikveh?
Mikveh.
Yeah. So this is a mikveh?
That's what I believe. It's a mikveh.
Yeah.
To cleanse your body. So they would have the water brought from from the top, where they used to have such a huge wells. They could have walked through the channel to bring water and have it, poured around the place for them to cleanse their bodies before go for prayer. And
because this is in the house, does that mean they were quite wealthy?
Wealthy? They could have. They could have been such wealthy people. And, the area or the size of the cave tells us that they could have been. Yeah. But was it used by the shepherds? That's the question. Yeah. No, I wouldn't believe that this was used by the shepherds. They would use much smaller, unorganized cave to keep their animals in, because at the beginning. And the reason that we are here is to learn and to know where exactly the shepherds have had or abided the flocks in the fields. Could have been this? No. I wouldn't think so. But I'm saying that this is a good example of the houses of the people of the first century. Okay? He could have been rich, as you said, for a rich man house because it has everything that man wanted at that time. But I wouldn't believe that this was the shepherd's house.
Why?
The shepherds, they were seen, as we said, the most lowly, poor. I mean, they have no place to stay. And that was God's reason for them to be chosen to spread the good news.